Hey, everybody, welcome to Called Up the Prospects podcast. I am Chris Peters, joined as always by Cam Robinson of Elite Prospects, and we are now presented by Wonderful Pistachios. We want to welcome our new sponsor, Wonderful Pistachios, to the mix here. It's exciting to have a presenting sponsor, and it's exciting to have one like Wonderful Pistachios. Cam, you got to be a pistachios guy. Come on. I mean, you got to love them, right?
Just look at me. I mean, of course I love pistachios. I'm just waiting for my shipment so I can just be snacking on these things while we're talking about them too.
Yeah. Well, I
The
got
royal
mine, as you
nut.
can see in the background here, and the whole family has been diving in here, and you know what? What's great about it? It's not just delicious; it's also pretty good for you too. And Cam, I'm as much of a pistachios guy as you are. I'm gonna guess that you don't know this, but Wonderful Pistachios is actually one of the highest protein nuts, and each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, which is 10% of your daily value. So now we're educating people as well here on Called Up the Prospects podcast. So Cam, how do you feel about that? You seem like a guy that's big on protein.
I'm loving it. I got to hit your protein levels, right? I'm going to start snacking on these things. The gym is going to be nothing to me after this. The muscle's just going to build on with these pistachios. No, but seriously, I love them. It's going to be great. Salty little snack, a little
Yeah,
health food
yeah.
too.
Well. Huge
Yeah.
welcome to Wonderful Pistachios, and again, thank you for your support of Called Up the Prospects podcast. We've got a lot to get to today. Cam, one of the reasons you don't have your shipment is because you're in Montreal right now. You are at the Four Nations Faceoff, and you were at the game, and it started last night. We're going to talk about that today. Where USA, by the time this podcast airs, USA will have already played Finland. For many of you, when you're listening to this, we're not going to necessarily go into that, but we are going to talk a little bit about what we learned from the very first game of the event. Cam, you were there. You were at the Bell Center Bell, if you are of a French speaking variety. But boy, it was a lot of fun to watch. Canada beat Sweden 4-3 in overtime. Set the stage for us. What was it like to be in the building for that moment? Best on best hockey for the first time since 2016.
Absolutely electric. Like it was. I think I can say this. I think I can confidently say this that was the best hockey, the fastest hockey I've ever seen live. That was probably maybe the most fun I've ever had in a rink watching hockey. Number one, I didn't have to fill in any scouting reports, so that's always nice too. You can just enjoy it. But that was so fast paced. The skill level, the fans were electric. To start the night with like chants Mario, Mario, and then as Lemieux walked in there pregame, and then to culminate it with chance of Crosby at the end, right? As he gets named player of the game and he gets himself his Rolex, and they win their 26th game in a row with him in the lineup, Team Canada internationally. So it was just all around. We had the lead, we had the comeback, we had the just back and forth overtime. You could see those guys were just gassed at the end of it. Like Nate Mack said, he's just like, I don't know about a 10-minute overtime. Maybe seven's the right number. They were dying out there, just going end to end and end. It was so much fun to be a part of. Got out of the barn super late last night. It is just dumping snow out there right now too. I gotta say, like it is a snowstorm here in Montreal. Sid and Nate Mack were like the first two guys on the ice for an optional skate this morning. Those guys are just animals too. So the players are invested. Obviously, they were hitting, they were skating, they were battling. This is a hell of a start to the tournament, and I'm just excited to see what's next.
Yeah, I am too. And as we mentioned, by the time you listen to this, USA will have played Finland in their first game. The big one is going to be USA versus Canada on Saturday night. And boy, I cannot wait to see what it's like. I mean, Austin Matthews got introduced just to open the tournament last night, and the Boo Birds were out big time for Matthews. They were not saying use because that's nobody says that, but like that's I was loving that, and I think he was loving it too. Gave a good smile, looked dapper out there in his USA gear. So, really excited for that. But since we've only seen one game, I think the things that stand out to me: the pace was frenetic. There was physicality, there was passion in the game, and I think that's the biggest thing is when you put these players in an environment and you tell them there's something to play for, they're going to show out. And I think that we're seeing that now. Watching the game, I couldn't help but think of the missed opportunities that existed in the last couple of years. But I think, you don't want to dwell on the negative. You want to think about the positive. And now finally you're seeing Crosby and McDavid and Nate McKinnon combining on a goal on the power play. I mean, the fact that that's three guys on any power play unit is incredible. But you have these moments, and it only can exist in this kind of way. Now, we were younger when the Canada Cup was still a thing, and I think that that was a level of passion that we haven't been able to replicate. Maybe the '96 World Cup, and then the Olympics, of course, are a different story. So there's that as well. But just based on what you saw last night, Cam, what were the things that you think we learned about this iteration of Team Canada with Crosby, McKinnon, McDavid? Mitch Marner gets to be the hero. Cale Makar on the ice as much as he was. Even Jordan Binnington, I thought at the end of the game made some critical saves that were like, oh, okay, maybe this isn't going to be as big of a problem as we thought. Though I believe his goals above expected was still on the wrong end. Either way, what have you? He made the saves when they mattered. But what did you learn watching that Canadian team, seeing that incredible back and forth game where Sweden was able to come back from a deficit a couple of different times and really make it interesting?
Yeah, I said it last night, McDavid to Crosby to McKinnon. It's like I feel like I've been waiting my entire life, my adult life anyways, to see that, to see those three players on the ice. Like honestly, right? Like how long have we been waiting to get Sid and McDavid, but just toss in McKinnon too, right? Like just to have those guys
Yeah.
on the same line for a power play. It just magic too. And like we asked some of the guys post game, like, what's it like to just know you can do anything on the ice? And like your line mates are going to be there right there with you, right? They're the speed, the IQ, the awareness, just that they know and they can facilitate and they can just jump into whatever you want to do. And they were saying like it's pretty special. Drew Doughty, this guy's played in Olympics. He's played basically everything you possibly can, and he's like, that's the fastest hockey I've ever been a part of. So it was really really cool to see. I think top to bottom in the lineup, Team Canada, they're playing their roles well, right? Like that third line, Jarvis to Point to Marchand. They get that 2-0 goal. One of the things too, I think that we should make note of here. Yeah, Shea Theodore is out for the tournament now, so that Canadian blue line has been hurt a little bit. But Cale Makar was not doing Cale Makar things last night, like not at all. I'm not sure if the reins were put on the defense, after the first 10 minutes when they're really pushing the needle, and then they're like, all right, let's sit back a little bit. But that was not Cale Makar at his best, or his second best, or his third best. So they've got another gear coming, hopefully, when he wakes up as well too. So it's a scary, scary group of players that they they can put together here for this tournament, and it is just so much fun. You can just see the guys are just in awe of Sid, right? Like even McDavid and McKinnon, and then the young guys too. It's that everybody's just so impressed with the 37-year-old, the oldest guy here, who is still just like dragging everybody behind him, putting him on his back too. It's just been terrific to see, and just like a great experience for all the players and for us too as well watching.
Yeah, it is. It was fun to watch and just to see kind of the configuration and how they were going to play and how they were going to play the roles that they were given and the way that the lineups were balanced. And I think that um, there's a lot of really interesting um, there's a lot of interesting things that kind of come along with that. So I'm excited to see where they go next and where when they're continually getting pushed. These games against the U.S. You thought that was fast. Well, the U.S. has Dylan Larkin and Jack Hughes and a number of other players that are going to push the pace as well in a puck moving D. So that's going to be fascinating too. But what also struck me was at the very beginning of the game, it looked like it was going to be a boat race and it was going to be over for Canada before you're over for Sweden before any really it got going. They obviously pushed back and I was impressed with that. I think that some of the things that we talked about last week was, does Sweden have the balance? Do they have, especially up front, they have a lot of guys that can play a higher skill game. They're not huge up front. What will they ultimately be able to accomplish? And so I think that that's really interesting to me, on a number of levels, to see where they go next. But what did also have to talk about Gustafson and the incredible saves that he made down the stretch as well, being a big part of that. But what did you make of Sweden as well? I feel like, I don't know that we were necessarily sleeping on them, because we did mention them as a potential contender, even though we think the Canada and the US are superior on paper. But I think they showed a lot in that game. What did you see from them, and what are the things that you think kind of they can hold on to going into their rest of the tournament here?
Yeah, a nightmarish first 10 minutes for them, right? Like they were overwhelmed by the speed and skill of Canada, right? Like they could barely get out of their own end. Like they couldn't get possession of the puck, like getting, the early penalty kill and then the quick goal against, like in the fans. Like you're right. It seemed like it was going to be a blowout at times there. I was hoping that Sweden was going to keep it close. It's just so much more fun. But they chipped away. The ice started to tilt towards Canada's end. Bennington, a bit of a softie there on Adrian Kempe's goal, kind of gave them even more life, brought them right back into it. It shows their resiliency too. And, some of their big players, Darlene was really strong for them. Lucas Raymond was very strong for them. Obviously, Gustafson made several, 5 alarm saves in the third period and in overtime. And, even early to keep the game close too. They had some of their name players showing up big, but some of the other guys, like they need to get them going too, right? Like Mika Zibanejad, Elias Pettersson, right? William Nylander, these guys they have to like be the leaders on that team offensively and really drive the bus. And so they weren't able to really get going against Canada there. And so that's obviously key for them moving forward. Their defense core is good. Goaltending is going to be a strength for them too. They need enough offense too, so they can't rely on some of their secondary guys to be putting it in. Jonas Brodin can't be scoring their goals every night. So yeah, they need to get those big dogs running up front, and they're going to have a good match against the Finns, and that should hopefully give them an opportunity to get that up.
Yeah, now by the process here with the 3-point game, they do have a point. Now Canada doesn't have the opportunity to get all the points that they necessarily would need to finish atop the group and be the de facto home team in the final as we expect them to be there. But now it's an interesting opportunity, and it kind of cracks the door open for the U.S. to potentially gain some advantage if they're able to have success against Finland and then obviously Canada and Sweden again, to get into the final. And in these short tournaments, everything is amplified. Every game matters. Every point matters. Goals for and against matter. There's plenty of different tiebreakers that'll come into play. But I do like the fact that the NHL is going to the more international style 3-point format. It makes the games a bit more meaningful. It'll be very interesting to see someday if that ever is to come to fruition at the NHL level. But I think the one thing that everyone universally agreed on last night on social media, and maybe Nathan McKinnon was the outlier, was the 10-minute overtime. Had that game not and had that game been a 5-minute overtime, we would have been into a shootout, and I don't think that we would have had as memorable of a moment. And I do think that 10 is probably excessive in terms of the NHL regular season, but I do think adding that 2 minutes on and then potentially making a regulation or overtime win, versus those two things more valuable, you see a little bit more pushing. But Cam, what did you think of the overtime specifically last night? And what do you think about the potential of extending the overtime in the NHL as well? Because they do that in the ECHL. They play 7-minute overtimes. It ends up being fewer shootouts. But I mean, I think with the way that overtimes have been played in the last few years, they don't always end up like the way that last night's did, where you got some of the best players in the world going 100 miles an hour. So just your general thoughts on that whole thing as well, since you were there to cover it.
Yeah, frenetic, right? Like it was so cool, but I think, like you said, it's a good point. Is that fans shouldn't expect that an NHL game, the overtime is going to look like that, right? We're not going to have McKinnon and McDavid racing up and down the ice. We're not going to have that level of talent going back and forth. It'll probably be more that puck possession, regroup, pull her back. But I am in favor of extending overtime because I hate games ending in the shootout. To be honest with you, once upon a time when I was a kid and it was only an international play, like, who boy, then I got super excited for it. Then I was hoping the overtime would go the whole length, and then we get a shootout because they were so rare. It was so unique to international hockey that it was so cool to see. Now it's like, oh man, like that would have sucked if last night's game was ended in a shootout. And I know it's just the first game; it's not a championship, a gold medal, or something like that. But I always prefer when the players get an opportunity to finish it with hockey. So whether that's round 3 or 4-on-4 or whatever, they've made the change for this tournament where they do the TV timeouts are longer and the intermissions are shorter, something that they're testing out to see if they want to bring into the NHL next season. Hopefully they're testing this out too, and then they find 10 minutes, maybe that's a little too long. Let's look at what the ECHL is doing with that 7 minute, and let's just like amp it up. I'm open to all sorts of creative things too, right? First 5 minutes of 3-on-3 don't work, just go 2-on-2. Let's open it up. Well, eventually, let's just throw one-on-one out there. We'll just have McDavid versus Austin Matthews play a one-on-one game and see who can score.
I love that. Like I want that. Like so when I was growing up, I went to a lot of IHL games, the old International Hockey League, and they had the shootout before the NHL did in terms of like actually deciding games. And I used to think it was amazing, but it's so much more fun to see these more hockey style being played. And also having covered the ECHL here at FloHockey, seeing that a lot is absolutely true for like just I'd much rather see the game end that way. It almost feels like the shootout has become anticlimactic in the era of 3-on-3 hockey. We've also seen 3-on-3 in various settings. Like I don't think full games and other things like that really makes it that much fun, especially with regroups and other things like that. Like that is one thing that I would say would make maybe overtime even a little bit more interesting if we instituted the backcourt violation, like in basketball, where you can't cross the red line twice. Different things like that, where you allow for a little bit more free flow, and then you have to make decisions. It changes the strategy a little bit if you can't regroup. But I just think that the way that overtimes are played, and when you see it with that level of talent as well, that we also have to remember that's a bit of an outlier than your March 25th regular season game with two teams out of the playoffs. So like that's kind of the thing that'll happen where we it's got to be smartly applied. But I do think that more overtime is better. It has typically been the players that have pushed back against not having the longer overtime. But when you see the results of something like that, it feels really good. Also, by the way, at the Four Nations, if the championship games goes to overtime, it's 5-on-5. It's straight up go until you win. So it's more like the Stanley Cup playoffs in that way. And there are definitely people that feel like the World Juniors should be played that way instead of having 3-on-3 for a decisive game. We saw 3-on-3 OT this year at the World Juniors. A lot of different things there. But I have to say, for any skeptics that were out there about this tournament, though, coming off of the first game and seeing the level of talent, I would say that if you love hockey, that was a great game for you to watch. And the thing is the Four Nations doesn't necessarily have to matter. We talked about it last week. Does it matter in the grand scheme of things? Does it tell us much? No, it doesn't. It's a short tournament, but it is an opportunity to showcase the game. And I do think moments like this will grow the game. Seeing Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid and Nathan MacKinnon on the same power play matters. Seeing Connor Hellebuck going against the world's best as basically continuing to stake his claim as one of, if not the best goalie in the world as of right now, is a really cool thing. Having this young group of Americans, having probably the most individually skilled Swedish team, top to bottom, that they've ever put in a tournament like this. And those are all things that really happen. Now, unfortunately, Finland's got their decor is absolutely demolished by injury, and that's just bad timing. That's the way it goes. But I think the good news is if you love this international hockey, well, you've got the Olympics next year, and then the NHL did announce that the World Cup of Hockey is coming back in 2028. And Cam, just any thoughts of that? They say at least 8 countries will be playing in that tournament. We don't know exactly who that will be. We don't know what the state of the world is going to be by then in terms of whether Russia will be involved. They didn't make those announcements, but they have made the commitment to 2028 having the World Cup of Hockey come back. And I think that this Four Nations face-off is a better prelude to that, and makes me a little more confident in an event like that because of the things that we talked about last week that didn't really make the World Cup of Hockey in 2016 a very sticky event. So just your general thoughts. I mean, as someone that loves international hockey, as someone that loves the sport, I mean, I can only see that as a positive, depending on obviously how it's executed and who's involved. But I know that this event would be more exciting if we did have Czechia, if we had Slovakia, if we had, and Russia too. I mean, obviously they're not in international hockey for the reasons that they're not in there, and that is not going to change in the immediate future. But to see this high level of hockey, it's just been inspiring and fun. So just general thoughts on the 2028 World Cup of Hockey coming back here in a couple years.
I'm gonna hit all these topics just one by one. I'm gonna just round them off here. Okay, so yeah, the people that are poo pooing this tournament, saying it was going to be a gimmick, it was going to be an all-star game. Shame on you for being wrong. Props to us for being right. That these guys are coming to play. Olympic jobs are on the line. You put on that Team Canada jersey, that Team USA jersey, that Team Sweden jersey, that Team Finnish jersey. You are ready to play, and these guys are absolutely ready to play. Number two, do not overlook the 2006 Swedish Olympic team, Mr. Chris Peters. We're talking Daniel
Fair
Alfredsson,
point.
Matt Sundin, Peter Forsberg, Henrik and Daniel Sedin, Nicky Lidstrom. That team was probably the most skilled Swedish team ever, and they took home the gold.
Fair point.
20, yeah, I had to. My boys, Henrik and Daniel, I had to give them love. As far as 2028, I am very excited for that. I think that doing it every 2 years is wise. I think that, it gives the players that aren't going to be playing a nice little 2-week break. Head down to Cabo, get some sun, have some fun, rest, get ready for the stretch five. The super elite players that are going to be playing in that tournament, sorry, no rest for you. Instead, you get to play best on best, and you get to play at a level of competition that's getting you ready for the playoffs anyways. Okay, and for the fans, we get that, but it's every second year. So on those off years, they do potentially get a bit of a break, especially for these like really elite players that play on those elite teams too that have long playoff drives. So I think that that's the right number. Gary Bettman said it's going to be 8 teams and it's going to be our players. Well, there's only 2 other countries, Czechia and Russia, that have enough NHL players to actually make teams from it. So obviously they're not all going to be NHL players, but I do think that hopefully by 2028 it will have Russia in it, right? And then we can have Czechia, and we can have Slovakia, and we can have Germany, right? Like we gotta get Leon and Timmy Superstar and Mo Seider. We
Yep.
gotta get some of those guys, JJ Paterka. So we want the best, right? We want the best. We need Pasternak. We need these guys in this. We need Kucherov. We need those type of players at these events. So hopefully 2028 happens. Hopefully they're there in 2026 too. Hopefully I'm in Italy as well watching it. So I think it's great. You can see like it's I've been like gasping for air for a best on best tournament. And so now, and I think the players have been too. They've been just itching for it. And you can see, Drew Doughty, like it was so cute the way John Cooper, we asked him, how did Drew take the news when he found out he made the team? And John was like, it was kind of cool because he was the only player I actually got to tell that he made the team, that he brought it, and he's like, and he took it like he won the lottery, like he was an 18-year-old kid, like he just made that 2010 team when he was 20 years old, right? Like that passion and enthusiasm from a guy like Dewey, who we know is a competitor and just like a fun-loving guy, but he wants it. He wanted to be there so badly that he pushed himself to come back, and he got in for 4 or 5 or 6 games before the break happened here, so that he could prove that he was ready. And here he is. Now he's going to be playing 20 plus minutes a night because Shea Theodore's out too, and he was already getting a regular shift. But I think all in all, the World Cup's going to be good. I know people are a little like, do you put it in February? Do you put it in September? Like, I think it's fine in February in the middle of the season. I think just the more best on best we can get is good for the game, good for growth, good for the fans, good for the players too, right? Ultra competitive guys. They want to play against the best. They want an opportunity to make a team, right? It's something that they've been doing their whole lives, like battling to make a team. And then you make the NHL and it's like, well, do I hope to make the all-star team, right? Like, no, they want to compete. They want an opportunity to work for something, find that success, make that team, and then go out and win gold. And yeah, so more of that, the better for me.
Yeah, so it's been fun to follow, and we will continue to follow it, and we'll obviously continue to catch up with Cam as he gets to enjoy covering this tournament on site and feeling the energy of it on site as well. Well, we're going to continue our conversation about the 4 nations, but we're going to focus it now a little bit towards the U.S. And so they haven't played a game yet as we've recorded this, but this is really probably one of the most exciting collections of talent that the U.S. has produced, probably since the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics, where they won silver, lost to Canada in the gold medal game. They're you look at 2010, that was a great team, but this team on paper is far more advanced. I don't think that they are necessarily as there's just so much skill on it, and there's a number of you've got a Norris Trophy winner. You could have had 2 if Quinn Hughes was there. Obviously, would have been a lot better if Quinn was there. But really, USA Hockey has only had this one best on best win going back to the 1996 World Cup. The last Olympic gold was the 1980 Miracle on Ice. You keep hearing all of those things, and USA Hockey has taken that personally. So I want to take a little bit of time, and you may notice my hat here. I'm rocking a Jim Johansson tribute hat because he is a big piece of where we're at is as a country in hockey right now because of the leadership that he had and also the way that he built teams. And I was lucky enough to work alongside him at 3 years at USA Hockey and having known him. And we obviously we lost JJ in 2018, and it's still a hole. But I think that the legacy that he has left here is something that will certainly continue to honor him. And when we watch this U.S. roster, if they play up to their ability, we're talking about one of the greatest collections of talent that they've had, and really a symbol of where we've come, how far we've come as a hockey country. Now, I'm saying we because obviously American. I want things to go well for Team USA. I want to see growth. I think that USA winning more and being more competitive is going to make a difference. We saw Sidney Crosby is now 26-0 in his last 26 games in a Team Canada jersey. So this team has this opportunity in front of them, but instead of talking about that so much, let's talk about how we got here. And Cam, I know you've been following the prospect world. You've been following international hockey. The national team development program is such obviously a frequent stop of ours in terms of viewings for top prospects. In the years that you've been doing it, and I'd love to get the Canadian perspective of this. How have you kind of seen this U.S. growth, and where are some of the areas that you've seen the growth and certainly the way that they have started to at least close the gap in terms of the sheer number of players that are now available in the NHL, the national teams, and kind of the guys that are getting drafted as well?
I think they've done a great job in a number of different ways to kind of get to this point. So number one, they capitalized on some success, right? They capitalized on Wayne Gretzky in California, right, in LA, and now we see 25 years later we have California kids making the NHL, becoming stars. They capitalized on some of those international success, right? That '96 World Cup, 2002 they lost in overtime. 2010 too, right? They lost in OT in the gold medal game. Those were, I think, they didn't come away with gold, but they were still success stories. It still was exciting hockey, and it probably got new fans into the game that then they can get into the grassroots level, which is what was like a real focal point for USA Hockey, right? Is that better coaching, better opportunities at a grassroots level. Then we have the next tier up where it's like these elite programs. Some of these academies, some of these programs that these kids can come up at when they're 12, 13, 14 years old. And then you move up, the USHL has become a better league. College hockey, right? It's been every step of the way they've improved it. Better coaching, better systems, having more kids to pull from, and that starts with getting them into hockey at a young age too, right? You need the numbers. It's a volume game to then work up and funnel upwards. So I don't think this is even a question. Is that the U.S. hasn't produced this level of talent ever. Is it, and it's going to continue to churn out talent. Like they have matched Canada, right? Forever it was Canada and the rest of the field, and sometimes Russia could hang with them, sometimes U.S. could hang with them, but then they'd fall back down, and it was always Canada at the top. And now it is quite literally the U.S. is equal. They are there. Yeah, they got 10 times the population, but they didn't have 10 times the population of players playing hockey at minor hockey levels. So it's just been a testament to decades of work that USA Hockey has put into this to become a powerhouse on the international scene. And here we are, like you said, the collection of talent that they have on this team is nearly unmatched, except for their sometimes friendly neighbors to the north, right? Like we used to be buddies, anyways. So I'm really excited, even though we're missing a couple players. Even though we're missing a couple players from that USA squad, I really wish Quinny Hughes was there. It's good news for Canadian fans that he's not, but it's gonna be really fun on Saturday night when those two teams get together, and then it's going to be even more fun in Boston when my oldest of predictions comes true. Where in 2010 they had to taste defeat in Vancouver in overtime for gold at the Olympics, and my prediction is that they're going to win it in overtime in Boston, and their fans get to live that moment of glory, and maybe inspire a whole new generation of hockey players to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of why this is happening now is because there's been this clamoring to see, okay, well, we know that Canada has still, a lot of the stars, a lot of the Hart trophies are going to Canadian players, a lot of the major awards. But now USA is, winning Vesnas, winning, getting guys that are Calder Trophy winners, getting all those different things that are starting to kind of these little benchmarks that are there. But what hasn't happened yet is the best on best element of winning that tournament. And really, I think it's always difficult, right? Because it's in the end, it's one game or two games, and it's not necessarily the measuring stick of what's happened. But there's a lot of numbers at play here. And, right now, 30% of the NHL is American, which I think in the 90s, it was like somewhere between 15 and 17% of, of the NHL was Canadian, or I mean, it was American. So now you've doubled that number in essentially 20 years. Now you've got another, or 30 years. Now you've got, basically the trend lines. And there was a great article in The Athletic by Sean Gentili and James Myrtle, kind of got together and showed some of the data in terms of the trends and how, the Canadian player, the number of Canadian players has trended down while the U.S. players have trended sharply. And there is that opportunity for USA to maybe become more of an equal with Canada in terms of NHL players in there. The draft as well. There's a lot of different things that have happened. So there are more Americans being selected. The USHL continually has more and more players drafted. There's still players getting drafted straight from high school and prep school, and some of these other elements. And then obviously there are still players that do go to Canada, whether it's major, junior. But we've also seen the improvement of the college product as well. And so that's another thing I wanted to point out is not only is the U.S. program getting better in terms of the number of players that they're saying, but the depth of talent is really where I think we've started to see much more. Because usually, like in the era of Chelios and Hull and Roenick and Madano, you could say, well, they might not be Gretzky and Lemieux level. They might, but they are the very, very tip top of the spear of the U.S. development program is they can hang with the best players of Canada. Now the depth has always been really the separating factor. There's a reason why USA has never won a world championship in the spring, which you can say matters or it doesn't matter. But Canada continues to do it even when they don't have their best players because they have the depth. So we've seen a lot of changes in that regard, and so now these numbers have changed. But what I think, you look at the NTDP obviously coming along in 1996 had a huge amount of influence in where things are, and I don't think it's just because of the players that they've helped. Like Cam, let's think about in the years that we've been doing this, how much has the USHL in general improved over these years? Maybe it doesn't have as many of the first round draft prospects because more of those guys are going to the NTDP. But I mean, they've attracted top Canadian talent, all these different things. So with that improvement, the NTDP kind of forced other places to say, well, why aren't we doing more for development? What are we doing? And I think there's been more investment to stay competitive. And then you see the Chicago Steels of the world. You see the Youngstown Phantoms doing it more. Muskegon, all these different places where the investment is starting to come. And then on top of that, you have teams that have done it for years and years and years, like Waterloo and Dubuque, and so there's definitely growth overall. But I think the other thing, and you touched on this, Cam, was the non-traditional markets and the growth of hockey. And as much as people don't like Gary Bettman, that early '90s expansion to the South, the continued growth in Canada or in California rather, those made a difference in player growth, and that's part of why USA Hockey has had this population boom. It's still not a huge number of people relative to the population of the country, but it's grown a lot, and so that's kind of cut things down. So one of the things I wanted to throw it back to you with, Cam, is one of the things that I've noticed in particular. You look at the goaltending development, and that you've got Connor Hellebuck, Jake Ottinger, Jeremy Swayman on there. You don't have Thatcher Demko, who certainly had a case. You've got guys coming up through the ranks. You look at Jacob Fowler, Trey Augustine, different guys that are kind of on their way. That has
Justin
been
Wolf.
a separating factor as well. So, I mean, and I think, like, if you say you're going to build a team from the net out, it helps when you have a guy who's the best goalie in the world. And of all those development paths that I mentioned, Connor Hellebuck didn't take any of them. It was Michigan high school to the North American League to college to the AHL and then the NHL. So, I mean, just in terms of goaltending, defense, I mean, like, we've seen a lot of growth there, I feel like. And what are the things that you've noticed maybe that the US has gotten right that maybe Canada hasn't? Because we talked about how the goaltending development there has seemingly stagnated a bit in terms of where these guys are coming from.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for what's up with Canada's goaltending and the development there. They've tried different things. They tried to limit, European goaltending slots in the CHL, so they're not taking away ice time from Canadian goaltenders and things like that. Don Cherry was on his soapbox for a decade, trying to clamor about some way to protect the CHL from Euro goalies. But just for the American side is that and especially for goaltending is that you find good players wherever they are and you develop them, right? So like Dustin Wolf, he's an elite player, came up through the Western Hockey League too. So there's different paths that these players can take to get to their ultimate goal and to this level. But it is just generally it's been impressive the way that the U.S. has found little edges that they can sharpen to improve their developmental model and to take things from Canadian hockey and to take things from European hockey, right? Skill-based things versus hard-nosed play, the Canadians, and trying to weave it into their own kind of culture, their hockey identity. Because they even going all the way back to 1980, right? Like that identity was like a bunch of kids that were up against the world and they were going to just win through sheer will. Well, you're not able to do that all the time, right? And so they needed to find like a true identity long term, and so I think they found it, and it's a nice blend of skill and snarl, speed and finesse with some heavy bodies as well. So it's the way the game is played now. You don't run guys right out of the building anymore, but you still have to play that hard nosed, edgy game. And they've put a focus on that at a young age, and it's blossomed into these pro level tournaments now, and it's great for everybody, right? Like, and once we get Russia back in there, it's great for everybody. We want more talent. We want the very best playing against each other at the top of their games.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you brought up a couple of great points there. One of them being, you're looking at I think one of the things that the people at USA Hockey got right was like, we don't have all the answers. So let's see what is happening in other places. You look at Sweden and Finland's population relative to the number of high-end NHL players that they produce, and it is incredible. I mean, it defies logic really because it's not like even in those nations, a lot of their best athletes, a lot of the European nations, a lot of their best athletes are playing soccer, football, however you want to say it. And that is part of it. And in the U.S., obviously, for many years and years and years, all the best athletes were playing football, all the best athletes were playing basketball, baseball. They weren't getting to hockey, and so now. Okay, well, you're seeing more of those athletes choose hockey or become diversified in their athleticism that eventually they pick their sport that they like the most. And so that's important. They've also, USA Hockey's encouraged people to play other sports. How many other businesses would there be like go do something else? Like go do like that's a I think that's important. And so I was at USA Hockey when they were just starting to formulate the American development model. I was really lucky to be there at that time to kind of see the inner workings of it. And there were a couple of key factors. I mean, I think they wanted to, right size development. I mean, how many 8U hockey games have you seen at full ice where it's one kid skating all the way down? That really doesn't exist anymore. And if it does, the people that are doing it aren't really they're helping maybe two or three kids that are doing it. So, you've got more cross ice, half ice kind of games. That's been a big emphasis. And I think it's worked because guys like, I would say the World Cup team isn't exactly an example of necessarily the American development model's impact because it started around 2010. I think for the guys that are like the 2001 and 2002 borns, they're in the mix. Like you could say maybe for them, but really it's still we're still kind of feeling the effects of that. And I think these more players are starting to get there. But I think really focusing on not having all the answers and trying to take things from Finland, take things from Sweden. I mean, for years they were looking at what the Soviets were doing to see how the heck do we, compete with that. Thinking back to guys like Lou Vero and others that really studied what Anatoly Tarasov was doing there. So it's taking all of those and having a good learning. But we're starting to see the other thing that you brought up, Cam, that I absolutely agree with and love is that there's a diversity of developmental paths. In Minnesota, it's community based. You play for your town, you play all the way up through high school. You have an opportunity to, make a decision when you're 15, 16, 17. to go where whatever the next phase is. The AAA model has its positive and negatives, but it's been very strong in Michigan. You see guys like Zach Wierenski come through that. The prep school and high school elements are still very strong. So, and then you mentioned Dustin Wolf, who was a California-born player, ends up going to the WHL, has a great experience there, becomes one of the best goalies they've ever had in that league, and now he's in the NHL. So there is a diversity of development paths in the U.S., and I think that there is in Canada as well. We're starting to see more things like academies, positively, negatively, however you want to see, AAA, however you want to see it. But players are getting more opportunities to find their way, and so I think that the moral of the story here, Cam, as people that love the two of us, we love hockey. We want everybody to get better because we get results like what we saw with USA versus Sweden. We're going to get results like what we're going to see with USA versus Canada here coming up. That makes the game better. And the fact that the rest of the world has gotten better is only good for the game. So I think it's a great thing. I can't wait to see it all in practice. I really can't wait for Milan Cortina. I think the Olympics in Italy, it's going to be as good as anything we've seen. And so I can't wait for that to come. But a lot of fun things happening. And I guess, for now that we've done this and Mr. Canada over there, you shaking in your boots yet?
Heck no. You're real. This is Canadian hockey, man. This is our sport. I come down
I
south,
mean,
I
it's
play some
great. And
baseball
that's the
against you
thing.
boys. I might get scared, hey? Yeah.
It's going to be fun though. Like I think it's going to be really fun to see this era of player go back and forth because that's the thing. Canada hasn't gotten worse. Let's just put it that way. Canada has not gotten
Yeah.
worse. That's the thing. It's like it's not like they're failing. Just everybody else is getting better. All right, let's go to Beyond Belief because we're going to continue talking about international hockey. There's plenty of good topics to get to, but Beyond Belief is where we issue a statement to one another and we choose if it's believable or beyond belief. And Cam, I'm going to start this one off with a bit of it almost feels like a cheat code at this point because we already saw a little bit of it. Sidney Crosby will be the scoring leader at the Four Nations Faceoff after his 3-assist effort in the opening game.
Got himself a nice head start, doesn't he? Hey, I think we'll say that that's a very true statement because Sid is just an animal with the Team Canada jersey on. 70 points in 55 career games, I believe. Already got 3-1. Yeah, I'll take that bet. I'll put Sid up there as going to lead this tournament. What do you think?
I think he's got a shot, but I still think that we're gonna see Connor McDavid open it up one of these days here, and also whoever ends up getting the most points against Finland probably is gonna be the scoring leader. So I'm gonna say beyond
Yeah.
belief, even
All
though,
right.
gosh, did Crosby look good last night? Holy smokes! And he comes off of an injury. I mean, at
He's so
37
good.
years old, like I'm not gonna deny he was by far the best player on the ice. But
Can I say
I
this?
mean, we also saw
Can I say
Nate
this?
McKinnon. Yes, please.
I got something. I got something. Okay. I took some slack for this article I wrote. I said that he is the greatest captain in hockey history. I mean, he's 22-0 Team Canada with him wearing the C internationally, the gold medals at every single level, the Stanley Cups, right? Can we just put Mark Messier and his Pringles commercials out to pasture? There's no way Sid's going into a new city and taking the C off of Trevor Linden. Sorry, a little bit of my Vancouver fandom as a child rearing up here. But hey, Sidney Crosby, Mount Rushmore, and the greatest captain in hockey history. I'm just saying it right now, and then let everybody come at me if they want. But I'm sticking to it. That is now my official stance.
I don't think it's a real hot take. I mean, like I think that is. You look at him. I don't know that there's ever been a more complete, you know, just just in general. I mean, like you love Gretzky, you love Lemieux, the size, the skill, incredible. Gordie Howe, just a legend in every sense of the word, and strong as an ox, and all these different things. But I mean, Sidney Crosby I mean, we almost forget that we almost lost a portion of his career
Right?
to the head
He
injuries, and
lost
he
his
comes
prime.
back and gosh, thank God, thank goodness he did because like that's the thing. Connor McDavid and Nathan McKinnon and all those guys, they all still revere Sidney Crosby. Max Celebrini, his favorite player growing up, Sidney Crosby. I think about the careers that he has launched to as an example to be emulated. I mean, yeah, let's call it the Sidney Crosby Leadership Award going forward. I don't think that's going to ruffle any feathers with in outside of
Mount
anywhere.
Rushmore. Yeah,
I
Mount
think so
Rushmore. I'm
too.
sorry,
I
Gordy.
think it's totally
He's not.
fair
He's
to
knocking
put
Gordy off
Sid
the
there.
shelf. He's up there now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, most complete I've seen in his or any era. So, all right, I toss it back to you, my friend, so I can get a little bit of the
Okay.
flames going here.
Okay. Sweden. The Swedes have the best defense core at this tournament. Beyond belief.
No, it's not beyond belief. It is. I think that they are the most balanced and the most interesting. One of the things we didn't talk about was how well Eric Carlson played in that game last night. You know, I thought that was some really good hockey from him. You know, I think you look at Matthias Ekholm and what he brings. Jonas Brodin, a very underrated player, I feel. You know, and then of course Victor Hedman, who is a world class defenseman. You know, I love the USD core, but we talked about it last time. Do they have enough balance? I think Canada losing Shea Theodore does take a hit in terms of where they're at. I still think that they're going to be a really impressive group. But you look at what Sweden has top to bottom, the way that they play, and the fact that they recovered from, you know, almost getting raced out of the building. I do think that the Swedish blue line on paper, and especially since USA lost Quinn Hughes, I think if you throw Quinn Hughes back into the mix for Team USA, it's a different story. But I do think that with the way that everything shook out, to me, Sweden has the most balanced and probably the most effective overall blue line that I would trust most. If you gave me a stack ranking, I would put them number one right now.
I can dig it. I mean, there I was in the second period intermission, grabbing some Bell Center hot dogs with Rasmus Anderson. And so, how many blue lines don't have a spot for Rasmus Anderson, right? Like that guy's a player too. He's very talented, very strong player, and he's number 7 on that depth chart too, right? So you named all the guys. Gustav Forsling too, right? Like that, just everything, good at
Exactly.
everything. Really, really well balanced.
What a
And
development
I
arc
think
for
that
him.
is. Oof, boy, giving up on Vancouver and Chicago to just turn into this like such a good two-way player, like so
Unreal.
strong, just mistake free, right? Plays nearly mistake free hockey most nights. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think they do have the best blue line in the tournament.
Yeah.
Sorry, Finland.
I'm
Close
with you on
second,
that one.
Finland. Just kidding, right?
Oh man. Yeah, it's bleak, but watch them. I mean, that's the thing about Finland. You doubt them until they all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, sorry. Snuck a win." So, we'll
Yeah.
see what happens. All right. Cam, I know where this is going already, and I feel like I'm going to have the same answer. So I'm just going to let you take a chance because I always think these things are more fun when you're at them, but also as a TV viewer, I was really enjoying myself. So wait a second here, Cam. The Four Nations is actually good?
Confirmed good. It is confirmed good, and I never had a doubt. I mean I was curious how it would go, but it's, and I've said it already, is that talking to the players, everybody was motivated. It is intense hockey. It is amazing hockey. The skill level is there. Anybody who still wants to be a hater after last night's game, it's just, you're just looking for something to hate on, right? You're just depriving yourself of joy watching these players and just enjoying yourselves in an awe of the talent and the speed and the desire to win that these guys are playing at too. And even though Finland's up against it, we'll see when we're listening to this podcast tomorrow. Maybe they showed up and they knocked off the US too, right? Because these guys are passionate players too, who have a lot of skill. They just don't have the name brand, especially on the blue line and the depth up front. But this is some of the best hockey we're going to get to watch. And for people that are like, oh, I wish I was just watching my team play a February game number 50 of the season. It's like, no, just take a minute, enjoy yourself for a couple weeks. That hockey's coming back. It'll be there for a while. Enjoy what we're given right now because this is a gift.
Yeah, it is. It is like a little, these are supposed to be the doldrums of the season right here, right? And now we've got it at such a high level. I'll admit I was a skeptic, but you leave it to the players to dictate how it's going to go, and they said, "Hey, this is going to be cool," and so now it's cool. So we love
That's
that,
cool.
and yeah, I am happy for it. So yes, the Four Nations is actually good. So Cam, I leave it to
Confirmed.
you as we close this one down. with a burning question. I've actually seen a lot of chatter about this on multiple sides of the argument. So let's get to it.
Mr. Chris Peters, Russia will play next year, 2026, at the Olympic Games in Italy. We will see Russia. Now, I'm not talking about the athletes from Russia wearing white jerseys with nothing on it or whatever. I'm talking we are going to see Russia in their garb next year in Italy battling.
It's beyond belief. It's beyond belief, and I'll tell you why. So the IIHF recently voted to keep Russia out for 2025-26. Now, that does not include the Olympics. That is a separate discussion. That is for the IOC. Now, it's beyond belief that they'll play in Russian regalia as Team Russia. It's not beyond belief that they could be the Olympic athletes of Russia again, as they were when they won, almost lost to Germany a couple of years ago. Back in what it was 20, however many years ago. But Pavel Datsuk has his Olympic gold medal from that team, so triple gold club guy. But to me, so the reason being, so the IIHF has routinely said it's about the safety of the athletes. It is, but it isn't, because it is a political thing, and it is Sweden, Finland, Czechia, Slovakia. Good luck getting them to agree to play Russia if the IIHF ban is still in place. Now, when you put the Olympics in front of people, that changes the dynamic. They're going to say, hey, we only get these every 4 years. If they're in it, and as long as they don't get to hear their anthem and all those other things, and there were athletes from Russia that were, admitted to the Summer Olympics and chose not to compete if they couldn't compete under their flag. And that could very well happen with hockey as well. Now, from a pure hockey perspective, Cam, I want to see him back, because the World Juniors isn't as good. The Olympics aren't as good. The World Championships aren't as good. You need to have that dynamic. It adds another team that is a threat to win. It increases the drama. It increases the quality of the games. It increases the meaningfulness of the games. But that isn't where the decision lies. And so it's up to the IOC now. They are going to have to make that decision very soon. And we don't know exactly when that is going to come down. But we are now, what was it? The other day was yesterday, I believe, was a year out from opening ceremonies in Milan Cortina. So there's a lot left to be figured out. But unfortunately, it is what it is. And until, if Russia is still in Ukraine at that time, I have a hard time seeing, Finland, Sweden, Czechia, Slovakia, and other countries being totally okay with them being involved.
Yeah, I wish I had a counter argument, but I don't. That's just the geopolitical landscape that we're currently living in. But we hope the future.
It's bigger than hockey, unfortunately.
Can we all just get along? Let's just all get along. No need to conquer our neighbors.
I'm going to send that to we can send that one to Putin. Yeah. Can we clip that and send that to Putin? Yeah. I think we should clip that and send that.
That's actually sent to Trump there. That one was
Cam Robinson, diplomat.
Let's just all get along.
Yeah, well, we are called up the Prospects podcast, Cam. So I think we got to talk about some prospects and just do a quick little NHL draft check in for 2025 and beyond. But Cam, you put out kind of your personal top 10 where things are going. Obviously, I think everybody still agrees Matthew Schaefer is the number one guy, but is Michael Misa closing the gap, and has he surpassed James Higgins as a threat to be number one, and B, more locked in at number two if we're gonna have why can't I speak? I don't know if I can't. Cam, I can't speak. Either way, is Michael Misa closing the gap on Schaefer for number one?
I was about to send some help for you there. It looks like you're choking on your
tongue.
Thank
you. I thought it was a stroke for 1 minute there.
Yeah, I got you, buddy. Yes, Michael Misa is a threat for number one. He is number two on my board. I think that he has 100 points, right? He's already got a Hundy spot in the OHL. We don't see that too often. I've got a real nice stat coming up if he can score a few more goals here in the next few games. The list of OHL draft eligible guys who have ever scored like a goal a game. or 2 points a game is very small, minute. So he is hanging with a class of players coming out of that league that we don't see too often. Dynamic, speed, skill, vision, shooting. Like, he makes guys better. He's played much of the season with a younger winger and then an overager in Epperson, a draft plus one guy who wasn't drafted, who was passed over. Now he's got Chernishev, the San Jose pick, who is it's like incredible how well they're playing together too, right? Chernishev looks like an all-star next to Misa. So he's producing, he's doing everything he can to put himself right in the mix for number one. And obviously Schaefer's on the shelf. Earliest we're going to see him back is maybe mid-March if we're really lucky. But there's a world here where he pushes past Schaefer too, right? Because the kid's got like 15 games under his belt this year, so it's more projection than anything when you're looking at him. And for an NHL team, especially one that wants some help down the middle, I think that he's absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, he has surpassed Haggins, and Haggins has been fine at the college level. He can kind of go dark in some of these bigger games, the Bean Pot, the World Juniors. He up and down a little bit. He's been good enough to stay right around in that top four, absolutely. But I do think Misa has done enough now that he should be considered the number two prospect at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, I give Misa a ton of credit too, because when you're an exceptional status player, you're getting picked apart. There's so much pressure on you, and he kind of faded a little bit further to the background for a Memorial Cup team, but really still was an effective player. Had a really good season, and now as the captain of the Saginaw Spirit is taking charge of a team, and it's not just the scoring. I mean, like the competitiveness, this physical strength that he's tacked on, the work that he's done on his body to get to a level that he's at now is really impressive. And you did mention Haggins. James Haggins in this season, they played Boston University 3 times, including in the Bean Pot final last weekend or last Monday, and 0 points in 3 of those games. So that is unfortunately a bit of a trend. You look back to the under 18 Worlds last year, wasn't able to score against Canada in the gold medal game. He did have a goal in the gold medal game against Finland this year, but fewer points against some of the tougher opponents that they faced, and that is becoming a bit of a theme. And so the thing is that James Hagen's still an incredibly intelligent player, fluid, has the capabilities. But the question is, at his size, is there enough there? Is there enough consistency? And I think he's a player too, and maybe Misa is the same way, where you say, they're not necessarily trending towards NHL next season, but they're doing. I think that Misa has created a level of separation with how he's played in the OHL this season that is starting to give you a little bit more pause. And as you see more of these draft rankings come out, I'm not going to be surprised to see Hagen slip a little bit further back. For me, he's still in my top 3. I think that's going to be one of those players that we're going to continually talk about as things move on. But one other guy that I wanted to mention as well, because he's been pretty red hot since he came over to North America and is rebuilding and reestablishing his draft stock, is Ivan Rabkin. He has 8 goals and 13 points in 11 games so far with the Muskegon Lumberjacks in the USHL, who you of course can watch right here on FloHockey. But Cam, we've heard all the things. Obviously there was talk about lack of fitness level. The coaches definitely were very critical of him in Russia. He comes over now. It's been it's been pretty impressive. I mean, to see him make that transition so seamlessly to North American hockey, to really adjust well. It seems like the physical strength and the physicality of the USHL hasn't really been a problem for him. Any lingering thoughts about the uptick in production and now the consistency that we're seeing from Ivan Rabkin after coming over?
Yeah, I mean, he better have, if he
Yeah.
if he was coming over, he better produce at the USHL level if he wants to be considered still a top 50 prospect, because even guys that are going PPG in the USHL, they're not necessarily first round prospects. So the goal scoring's nice, the production's nice. Keep it going. Let's see the 2-way game. Let's see you bulldoze your way through some plays. Yeah, he needs to. I think he needs to really pop, right? And we see some of the elite players put up, big numbers as like draft -1 in the USHL. So I do have high expectations if he wants to kind of get back on my radar to be a legitimate, I don't even know, a guy in the 20s sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's certainly fair. Muskegon is one of the top teams in the USHL. They have a chance to go on a deep run here. I think a big playoffs from Rabkin could make a difference for him. That is a tougher time. Things really tighten up at the USHL level, just as they do at all levels in the playoffs. I think that's probably where that's gonna be our best opportunity to see where he really is relative to his peers. I feel like, but it's certainly a positive sign to see a player like that come over. And I agree. Yeah. He's doing what he had to do to just even get back into the conversation for the first round. One other thing last week, before over the weekend and going into this week, there was the U18 Five Nations in Sweden. That was won by Finland, which was kind of a shocker. They beat Sweden in that tournament. Finland, we've been very critical about their draft class. You talk to scouts in Finland, they've been very critical about their draft class, but they do win this tournament by 1 point over Sweden. USA finishes third in the event. But there were some good signs. Cole McKinney had a very strong tournament for Team USA. He's been a guy that's kind of hovered around the first round conversation, as has Jack Murtagh. Both of them had 7 points in the tournament. Anton Frundell did have 6 points in the tournament, but again, you lose that game to Finland, costs you the tournament on home ice, and you're not as much of a factor. That's going to be there. But there was another guy, and he has been playing with the under 18s this year. He's a 2008 birth year, and that is Viggo Bjork, and he was also tied for Sweden's league. Cam, you've seen him a bit more than I have. I know that he's a player and a name that a lot more people are getting excited about. What are the things that he's not a big guy yet? He's still young. He's got an opportunity here, but what are the things that you've seen from him, and why is his name continuing to pop up at the top of these scoring lists for Sweden?
Kid's good. Kid's good. He was a little underwhelming at the Holinka, playing above his age class, especially coming out of like some Division II hockey the year before that as well. So, but what he's done at the J20 this year is eye popping numbers. So again, had a really strong Five Nations. He's a threat for 2026, like a top 5 pick next year. So him and Ivar Stenberg are the players to watch coming out of Sweden. They're both pushing to kind of be in that top 5 range, with Gavin McKenna and Ryan Robrack out of the OHL. So there's some players. 2026 is going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, Bjork, I really like the way he's kind of rebounded after. Stenberg greatly outplayed him at the Holinka, and like I was there for all those live views, and it was like night and day. And I was like, oh well, there is like a 7 or 8 or 9 month. I don't have their birthdays in front of me, but it's a large gap age wise between the two. But they're both in the 2026 class. But Bjork is highly talented too, so he's definitely going to be one to watch.
Yeah, currently leading the Swedish U20 ranked 62 points, and right behind him is his brother with 60 points, who is a 19-year-old, so a little bit different. But and then right behind them, Ivar Stenberg, who's averaging 2 points a game in the U20
Yeah.
level for Frölunda. So obviously, a lot of excitement among those Swedish players, and certainly guys that will be popping next year. But still, to see Finland get a win at the Five Nations, which is the prelude to the under 18 World Championship. I mean, that's a big feather in their cap, because I don't think anybody would have anticipated them coming out of that. They did lose to the U.S. in that tournament, so it wasn't all roses for them. But to come out and win in Sweden is still impressive. So now that makes the under 18 World Championship a bit more interesting. I also think USA is going to have to figure some things out about their lineup and what that's going to look like at the under 18 Worlds. Who do they bring in? Are they going to open the doors back up to guys that have left the program early, like Cullen Potter and Will Horkoff? Guys in the USHL like Ben Keevan. Where are you going to find the guys? Are there enough underagers to kind of come in there and supplement? You're hosting the tournament. You got to put your best foot forward. And so obviously USA has some work to do before that comes along. But as we get close to wrapping up the show, let's bring it back to our favorite topic of the last couple of weeks, and that is the Four Nations Faceoff. And Cam, you're on the ground. You just saw, Canada's defense has suffered a loss of Shea Theodore. Travis Sanheim comes in. If there is another injury on the blue line, Canada will have a next man up. They also, didn't have Alex Pietrangelo, who pulled out of the tournament, replaced him with Drew Doughty. The matchup to watch, we talked a little bit about USA's goaltending versus Canada's scoring, but what about USA's forwards, the high skill, the high talent up front versus this Canadian blue line? Do you think Canada's blue line has the depth? So if you're in a head-to-head matchup, you've got USA's forwards or Canada's defense, who do you like to come out on top if that's the head-to-head matchup?
USA's forwards so deep, so talented, and Canada's blue line is it's not that 2010 team, it's not that 2014 team either, right? Like those blue lines were something to marvel at, and Cale Makar can take over a game offensively. So I think that there is that dynamic element still yet to be shown. But no, I give me that kind of that 12 deep on Team USA running up against those 6 on the blue line. Yeah, I'll take the Americans.
Yeah, and I think that the injuries have made it, part of the equation here of how it's different. I mean, I like Josh Morrissey. I think there's been, growth in his game. Devon Taves had a couple of great opportunities at the offensive end. Last night couldn't convert on them, but that's which can be a problem at times. But you look at the U.S. forward group, and I think back to that '96 World Cup, and Ronick actually wasn't on that team, but you had Madonna and Hull, and you had Guerin and all these other guys. But you look now and you're saying, wow, Eichel and Matthews, and you've got Jack Hughes on the wing, and you've got Dylan Larkin on the wing, and you've got all these different guys, and Chris Kreider's your extra. You've got a 40-goal scorer in Kyle Connor up there. You got the Kachuk brothers. You just kind of have a mix of everything in that group. It's not just the skill. There's a heaviness to them. There is a speed factor that is there for some of those players, not all of them. But there's that when you combine that heaviness, that skill, and that I look at guys like Matt Boldy and what he's going to bring. I think he's kind of unheralded. And we talked last week about how much respect I have for Brock Nelson, looking like Mr. Fantastic with the gray on the sides and everything else. But he's still an effective player, a continual 30-goal scorer that's likely on your fourth line. So this is about as deep of an American forward group as I've ever experienced in my lifetime, which is really exciting. And so I will also take the USA forwards, not just because I'm an American. It's because I think I know at least a little bit about hockey. But I will say, you get them in that setting, it's obviously not just going to be the USA forwards against the Canadian defense. You've got to also now hopefully get the puck against that Canadian forward group that was so dominant in possession early in that game against Sweden. So I cannot wait for Saturday. I think it'll be one of the best games that we have witnessed probably since the 2010 gold medal game. I mean, like that was one of the greatest hockey games I've watched. And now we're going to have something. It's not on the Olympic scale. We're not trying to say it's that important, but in terms of quality, man, we got some pretty good stuff going here.
We got some cooking here. Can we also say that, man, they did Brock Nelson dirty with that picture, hey? Just the angle that they took it from. He looked like he was decrepit, like he needed this stick as a cane. Like he's just, I think it was Mike Camino posted like something like, this day in 1912, we got like the guy that someone was like, was Brock Nelson there? Like it was just like,
I know.
They did that guy so dirty.
Hey, when he
Father
puts the
Christmas.
helmet on, though, and he's ready to go. And the one of the great things. So Brock Nelson. One thing, just a quick aside on Brock Nelson before we get out of here. Warroad, Minnesota. Basically, anytime USA has ever won anything, they had somebody from Warroad, Minnesota on the roster. So he comes from the Christian family. So Dave Christian, who was on the Miracle on Ice team, is his uncle. He looks a lot like Dave, actually, I think, in the face. And Bill and Roger Christian were part of the 1960 Olympic team that won. So he has this great lineage, and now he finally gets the opportunity in a best on best to really shine. So I'm excited to see Brock Nelson. But yes, unfortunately, and hey, as somebody that's also going gray, I super respect not just fermenting that and just doing the thing, because we gotta let it show, gentlemen.
I got the gray in the beard
naturally, buddy. And I think Brock, you're aging gracefully as far as I'm concerned. Cam, before we get out of here, what's coming up on Elite Prospects? What do you guys got cooking for this Four Nations Face-Off?
Oh boy, all sorts of stuff. I think I dropped 4 articles yesterday, like 9 or 10 videos. We're just churning out content all over the place. Hey, we got something really cool going on actually at EP, something new. It's called My Feed, or just Feed now, I think, where it's like you follow a bunch of, when you're on a player's page that you're interested in the player or the team or the league or whatever, you click a little follow button. It's going to be like your IG for hockey on Elite Prospects, where anytime this player is mentioned in like an article that we tag in, or or he's got a player movement, or something statistical cool happens, it's going to pop up on the feed for you. So I was running out a bunch of these little kind of mini articles, and it's all free content. You don't need to be a premium subscriber for it either. So the feed is going to be really cool on EP. We're just beta testing it right now. But yeah, loads of content coming out here at the Four Nations. I'm still working on that big piece where I've been interviewing a bunch of GMs and AGMs and analytics guys for the anatomy of a trade. Hopefully I can get that out pretty soon here, but definitely before the trade deadline kicks. Our boys are scouting. We've got, I think Mitch Brown was telling me it's like over 5,000 scouting reports too that we placed for this season already. So those are all on the player pages too. We've got Michael Meese is going to be our player of the month this year, our verified player of the month. And so he was stoked talking about how he's really loving the scouting reports on his player page and on everybody else's too. So we can kind of scout the competition for first overall. So lots of good stuff cooking over at EP these days.
Yeah, absolutely. That feed thing is going to be cool, and I'm excited to see how that turns out. And obviously, if you are in hockey and you are trying to figure out anything, you can go over to Elite Prospects and find all of that great information, because I've been using it pretty religiously. I've got a couple pieces up on FloHockey, and one coming after this podcast is recorded about the developmental pass of Team USA from their U15 or 15U seasons all the way through to their NHL careers, and kind of seeing the various paths. And a lot of these guys, we're going to see a lot of varying paths from some of them. The D-core is pretty similar. There's only one non-NTDP player on there. But aside from that, you look at the goalies. All three of them played high school hockey before they played in the national team situation, or in the USHL, or wherever they ended up. And so it's always fun to kind of follow those paths. So we've got those stories coming up. We'll continue to have some live update blogs as well from the Four Nations. We're big fans of international hockey at FloHockey, and even though it's not on our air, we are certainly going to still cover it. So a lot coming there, and obviously draft rankings, other things coming from me. We've got a lot more stuff coming up. College hockey is really ramping up as well, so we're going to have plenty there. Lots of good stuff there, and of course, we're always covering the AHL and ECHL and so much more as we get through this hockey season. Lots of fun to be had. Also want to give a huge shout out to our new sponsor, Wonderful Pistachios. We're so glad to have them on board. And hey, I think that, we've never really had ad reads on here. So I'm going to do one of those traditional ad reads, because I'm so excited about having an ad to read. And folks, here we go. I'm going to get my marketing voice on. Cam, are you ready for this? Are you ready?
I'm
Just sit
excited.
back. No interruptions. I need to be able to read. Delicious meat, nutritious. Crack into a good source of protein with tasty, healthy, Wonderful Pistachios. Each 1 ounce serving of Wonderful Pistachios contains 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. It's one of the highest protein nuts out there. Go ahead and get yourself a bag of Wonderful Pistachios today. Shells, no shells, whatever you prefer. Lots of different flavors as well. We want to welcome them and thank them for their support of Called Up the Prospects podcast. So make sure you are getting yourself some Wonderful Pistachios. If you love Cam and me and you want us to continue to do this, pistachio up right now. So let's do it. Cam, I hope that you have a lot of fun here in Montreal. We're going to get back together next week. We're going to have plenty to talk about. We'll have a lot more Four Nations to talk about as well. And then obviously we're getting closer to the college hockey postseason, the CHL postseason, the USHL postseason. Lots of high-level prospect hockey will continue to be talked about here, but we will also be giving you all of our thoughts from the biggest stories in the game today. But Cam, have fun, man. Enjoy it. I know you have fun no matter what, but you're in one of the epicenter of hockey right now. It's pretty awesome.
It is great. I hope it stops snowing though, so I can actually get to the rink tonight and get back there. There is a lot of snow here, people. And also, when we're supposed to fly to Boston, it's calling for like a foot that night. So hopefully, I'm getting to Boston okay too. But no, this is great. And you're right. I'll find a way to have fun, even if I have to crawl there through the snow, tunnel my
Yep. And
way
if you are
in.
if you're in Montreal, maybe deliver some snowshoes to Cam so he can get to the Bell Center. And maybe provide also guidance. You could be his Montreal Sherpa. You could do a lot of different things. There's a lot of fun.
That's gonna be good.
A lot of fun to be
No
had
dress
there.
shoes tonight.
But yeah, Cam,
Yes.
it's always a pleasure talking to you. I'm jealous of you at the moment being out there. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun. Enjoy the games, especially the one on Saturday. Everybody else, thank you so much for listening. We're super pumped to be continuing the podcast here. We've had a blast together doing it. So let's do it again next week. Maybe even around the same time. We'll figure it out. But everybody, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy the Four Nations Face-Off, and make sure you are subscribed to FloHockey. Go check out Elite Prospects. Check out all the work there, and go buy yourself some wonderful pistachios while you're at it. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Called Up the Prospects podcast, presented by Wonderful Pistachios. I'm Chris Peters for Cam Robinson. We'll catch you next time.